Welcome everyone to Charting a Transdisciplinary Future for Canadian Small-Scale Fisheries. My name is Evan Andrews. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Ocean Frontier Institute at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Thank you for joining us from around the world and for the final day of the SSF Open House and for World Oceans Day. Before we go any further, I would like to hand it over to Christine Knott, Sandra Eager, and Emily Reed-Musin to deliver land acknowledgements and some words about Canada.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Knott. Evan, is that video playing? Does anybody else hear that?
Do you have an echo?
I have music playing somewhere. Everybody else is good? Okay, I'm just going to keep going then. So my name is Christine Knott. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Ocean Frontier Institute in St. John's, Newfoundland as well. And for those of us in St. John's, we respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has now been erased forever. We also acknowledge the Inuit, the island of Ukituhumakuk, which is Newfoundland. We also, as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq. We acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Natassian and the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and the Inuit of Nunatukavut. We recognize all First Peoples who were here before us and those who live with us now and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all. I'll pass it on to Emily.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Reed-Musin, and like Christine, I'm a postdoc fellow at MUN, but I'm physically based in Nova Scotia. So we'd like to begin by acknowledging that I live, and some of you based here live and work in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, which is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik Maliseet people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established rules for what was meant to be an ongoing relationship between nations. So we acknowledge this land not only in thanks to the Mi'kmaq Nation, who've been stewards of the land for generations, but also to name and confront the historical and ongoing legacy of colonialism and its impact on the Mi'kmaq people. So is it Sandra who's I'm passing it to?
Thanks, Emily. Hi, my name is Sandra Eager. I am a postdoc researcher at MUN, also at Grenfell campus. Presently, I am in Waterloo, Ontario, and I would like to acknowledge that I work and live on the land that is situated on the Haldimand Tract, land that was promised to the Haudenosaunee of the Six Nations of the Grand River, and are within the traditional territory of the Neutral, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Thank you very much for this opportunity to reflect upon the land that myself and many others have been able to explore, appreciate, and have had many great experiences on. Thank you very much, Evan.
Thank you, Christine.
Okay, so we also wanted to recognize that Canada is currently in a period of mourning, collectively grieving the loss of 215 children found in an unmarked mass grave on the grounds of the former residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia, and for the many others who never returned home. We join communities across Turtle Island and around the world in mourning the loss of these children, their stories, and their contributions to Indigenous communities in Kamloops, Shawetmuk territory and beyond. This is a tragic reminder of the not so distant history of harms and atrocities committed against generations of Indigenous peoples, the horrors of the residential school system, and the intergenerational trauma that the system continues to perpetuate even to this day. We are unfortunately only beginning to work towards acknowledging and reconciling these historical and current atrocities, and we reinforce the urgency of taking further steps to address the intergenerational effects of colonialism that continue to impact Indigenous communities. If you'd like to learn more about the history of Indigenous peoples in Canada, I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and its calls for action.
So thank you very much, Christine and Emily and Sandra, and through persisting through some dance music ringtone that was a little bit unfortunately timed. So it's a complicated World Oceans Day in Canada, as it was for other reasons last year. And we are keeping these events and histories in mind as we look forward today for the future of SSF in Canada. This week so far in the SSF Open House has been filled with wonderful fun, and it's sometimes heartbreaking stories about SSFs around the world. But what about Canada? Are there small-scale fisheries in Canada? What do they look like? How are they doing? It's important to ask these questions, although we are not the first ones to do so. Researchers going back at least to the late 80s has questioned and made calls for attention to small-scale fisheries in Canada. So why don't we talk about them in the way that others do around the world? We typically associate SSF with the developing world, but their increased visibility due to some great work, including people in TBTI, is not the cause of under recognition here. We also do know that people like Yinji Lee, TBTI Japan, and others, that the small scale fisheries concept can have this galvanizing power in the developing world, in the developed world. And so there might be some momentum to ask these questions. Canada is now a friend of the SSF guidelines, but what kind of friends are they? Will Canada take the SSF guidelines to the airport and help it move on to the coast, rivers, and lakes here? Or will we just tweet at them every once in a while or like their Instagram stories from time to time? We leave these as open questions to be answered by a new network called SSF Can. The timing of this network could not be any more appropriate. Canada is implementing the Blue Economy Strategy, and we heard yesterday from Moniba in Spain that protecting the SSFs is not an a priori component of a Blue Economy Strategy. Canada also just started co-designing its blueprint for the UN Decade of Ocean Science. And here we're talking about what kind of science is needed to support SSFs in Canada. And we argue for a transdisciplinary future. These ideas, intentions did not come out of nowhere. SSF Can emerges from and with the Ocean Frontier Institute Module I, with ideas and people also from TBTI, Ocean Canada, Rural Resilience, and Ocean Nexus. And today we are checking in on the Ocean Frontier Institute Module I, a module informing governance responses to change, focused on research in Atlantic Canada related to fisheries and ocean sustainability. This module has gone from taking stock into diving deep and is near its final stage of research known as getting it right, recognizing that there are many it's to get right. Today, we are also launching the third stage of this network, Getting It Right, and teasing a dialogue to be hosted in 2022. 2022 will be quite the year. It will be the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, and also the 4th World Small Scale Fisheries Congress. Both Getting It Right and SSF Can have these celebrations in sight. Today, we're going to have an engaging session. We're going to start with a short video that shows how energized and excited we are for 2022 and beyond. Then we'll zoom into Atlantic Canada and be joined by 7 panelists, some of whom you've heard from already, working in Atlantic Canada, who will speak to 3 themes that will guide the Getting It Right dialogue: the blue economy, governance, and the future. And of course, these panelists are also members of SSF Can. And I look forward to talking a bit more with them, along with Christine Knott, who will help me facilitate the conversation. And those that you haven't heard from will get a chance to introduce themselves. So now I'm going to turn over to our video.
Welcome everyone to the webinar series that is being organized by the research module in the Ocean Frontier Institute. This module is called Informing Governance Responses in a Changing Ocean.
So what's this submodule I1 about? Well, at a basic level, it's about examining questions around access to resources and markets. Because of course, without someone having access to fisheries resources and somewhere to sell those resources, there are no commercial fisheries.
The title of today's presentation is Recruitment, Training and Retention.
So findings from the environmental scan in the paper suggested that the research output from Newfoundland and Labrador, especially in the 1990s and early 2000s, included making visible women's roles in paid and unpaid aspects of the fishery that were often ignored or undervalued.
So I'm drawing on conservation psychology, as Ratna mentioned, as part of my theoretical background.
I'm going to share with you my research, which has the purpose of advancing an understanding of fisher behavior to guide ongoing efforts to strengthen the governability of Canada's Atlantic inshore fisheries. So now I will ask everybody here to turn on your cameras. So I told you that video was a little epic at the end. That wasn't me playing the flute. So welcome everyone again. Thanks so much for watching our little video. We're going to start now our moderated panel. And to begin, I will turn it over to Christine. Did you get a chance to introduce yourself? I can't remember. Great. Okay. So now I'm going to start with our first question. Very, very nice and easy one. What makes you excited about your work? So tell us who you are and what you do and why you're excited. We'll start with you, Emily.
Right. Hi, everyone, again. As I mentioned, my name's Emily Reed Musson. I have a background in geography. And I guess what makes me excited about this work is that I'm relatively new to fisheries research in Canada, but I have an interest, or my previous research was in how workers in non-standard work navigate the occupational health and safety system and workplace rights. So it's been interesting to bring that lens to this work. One thing that has struck me the most about working in small-scale fisheries research is how fish harvesters and fisheries workers, people involved in coastal communities, have so much knowledge about their environment, about the ocean, about fish species, about just daily weather conditions, which is actually what I study, is how they use the weather forecast and manage weather hazards. And another part of this was about transdisciplinarity. Did you want me to talk about that a bit? Okay. So yeah, my research with OFI is very transdisciplinary. I had to look up the definition of that though, because I was like, and there's all these, anyways, it's a wild internet world of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. So I'm not sure I even know what that means, but I'll say it is very transdisciplinary, I think, mainly because my everyday work is with very different co-supervisors. One was trained as an atmospheric scientist, and I'm a social researcher and a qualitative researcher. So there's a lot of differences in how we interpret our research. So I'll just leave it at that.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. Sandra?
Thanks, Evan. So I'm currently working with the Rural Resilience Group at Grenfell Campus and the Coastal Roots Network, which are very cool organizations and places to work, because I think that they really embody this aspect of transdisciplinarity, and that really is what makes me excited. And so I take transdisciplinarity to be, moving our research beyond academia into external organizations and local communities to co-create a research project that works for them and that's the right fit for them. So I really just love working with local groups. There's never-ending, character and fun and different individuals, but also you really feel like you're immersed in a space that will make a difference. The other part I will say about myself and what I'm excited about is I love sharks. I thought about this question and how to introduce myself for a really long time, but I started in biodiversity conservation in Africa and the Caribbean as a natural scientist, and just slowly worked my way to what I thought where the core of the issues were. And I'm sure we'll be talking about governance later, but now I am an interdisciplinary marine scientist and working in coastal communities, not directly relating to sharks at all, but I think that everything, we do on the coasts and working with communities, social research, natural science research, it is impacting our oceans. And I think that the action is in managing human activities in the coastal and marine spaces. So that is what I am excited about. And thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Sarah.
Hi, sorry. So my name is Sarah Langer. I'm a PhD student in transdisciplinary sustainability at Grenfell Campus, Memorial University. I have a bachelor's degree in sustainable resource management, as well as a master's in global development studies. So for my PhD, I'm very interested in how much understanding of ecological economics is needed for a community to motivate change for strong sustainability. And ecological economics is the idea of nested systems. Our economy sits within our social sphere, which is all encompassed in our biosphere. And our focus should be on maintaining the whole biosphere and ensure that the economic sphere doesn't exceed the social and ecological limits. But it's much more complex than this because everything is so interconnected, and we need to be solution-based in ecological economics. Being problem-based in high complexity situations focuses too much on the why and not what's next. So for me, small-scale fisheries have been fascinating because of the interplay between oceans, landscape, human and economics, and so on. Communities that have undergone sustainable transformations seem to have that understanding of ecological economics principles. And I think it's important to learn and collect this information. Again, our world is complex. We won't know all the interactions and everything that's around us, but sharing what we know collectively between community members, academics, could really help us with solutions-based actions. So I did work with work package 7 for the OFI, where I looked at social enterprises such as Shorefest and on Fogo Island and how they've been contributing to the local economy. And it was really interesting, but it also introduced me to the Fogo Island fishers who resisted resettlement after the fish stocks depleted, and they were very solution oriented. They had real world responses. So I think there's a lot of lessons here for transdisciplinary, and I am to have that transdisciplinary in our work. We want to have co-creators of this ecological economic knowledge for the small scale fishers in the future. Yeah, and just excited to work in, again, solution-based areas.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So we're going to turn it to Zaman, who's going to maybe keep his camera off because of some internet connection.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, my internet has some problems. If I turn my video, I will lose my connection. So it's better to stay in rather than turn on the camera. My name is Zaman Sajid. I'm working as a postdoc at Memorial University, and I'm also working with the Ocean Nexus Center. My research is in safety and risk engineering. In particularly, I'm working on aquaculture risk model project. And my background is in chemical engineering. And I can say that I'm purely working in interdisciplinary project where I'm dealing with the small scale fisheries and the aquaculture at the same time. I'm very excited for this project because in the chemical engineering, I used to perform some risk assessments on the occupational health and safety, the people who are involved with the chemicals and working in the industry. So there was a report from the UN which mentioned that the marine fishing is the most dangerous civilian occupation. So that's what motivated me to work in this area. And I'm very much excited for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Zaman. At least we have your picture so people can see what you look like. Okay, Frederick.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Frederick Seer. I am a physical oceanographer and a research scientist at DFO here in Newfoundland, so Fisheries and Oceans Canada. I was born on the Magdalen Islands, Quebec, so a small archipelago in the middle of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And one of my grandfather was a fish harvester, but he died long before I was born. So I really never grew up with a close member of my family fishing, except maybe summer mackerel jigging with my uncle. But when I was 9 or 10, I first learned the word moratorium. And I still remember the tension and anxiety in the family as they were listening to the radio in the kitchen at lunchtime. And I remember me asking, so, but what it means? And the answer was simple. It's just we cannot fish anymore. So fast forward years later, after studies brought me from engineering physics, this is because I wanted to be an astronaut at the beginning, to climate science and then oceanography, I ended up here in Newfoundland working for DFO, for the same entity that imposed a succession of moratoria in the early 90s that partly shaped the future of Atlantic Canada. So it wasn't my dream at all to work as a public servant, but this job really plunged me back into my youth and made me realize how important it is to have a strong science at the government level. So to answer the question about transdisciplinarity, in my case, it's more a mixture of physical sciences training at school and social training in my aunt's kitchen. So, and what makes me excited about my work is that an important part of my job at DFO is to understand the changes in ocean climate, digest the information, and communicate this to fish biologists or fisheries managers. And I nearly go to all fish stock assessment in the region here. And so what really makes me excited is that I start to understand how the decisions are made at the government level and where I can contribute in relation to this. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maria.
My name is Maria Andrea Lopez Gomez, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow with the Ocean Frontier Institute in the Sociology Department at Memorial University. And my work focuses on recruitment, training, and retention of people in small-scale fisheries in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'm especially interested in how policies and regulations have affected, well, as Frederick mentioned, how they have affected the workforce in small-scale fisheries, how to become a fish harvester has also changed, and how to stay in the workforce has also changed. My background is a bit different. I'm a social epidemiologist. So for those who are not familiar with that, epidemiologists became very famous last year due to the pandemic. Social epidemiologists look at social causes of disease. So my previous work was focused on population health data. I looked at employment histories and how unemployment, employment, and sick leave periods in the life of people cause health outcomes, mortality outcomes, or sick leave later in life. But now with this project, I get to focus more on how policies change working lives in small-scale fisheries, which I think it's much more interesting than just looking at population health data from a quantitative perspective. Here in my work, I look at quantitative things such as economic outcomes or number of licenses, number of fish harvesters in the workforce, but I also get to look at the experiences up close from people. And what excites me about my work is just seeing all these, just connecting the broad changes, socio-ecological changes and the broad policies to the experiences of people from different ages and from different genders as well, and also seeing how it affects the workforce now and how it will affect the workforce later in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Jamie.
Hi there. Yeah, my name is Jamie Snook, and I'm an Inuit person from the Nunatukkavut region. I was born in Mary's Harbor, Labrador, is a small coastal village. So when I saw your question about how I came to be in small scale fisheries, it was always a part of my family's life, and people who are familiar with famous fishing communities like Battle Harbors, where one part of my family is from, and my dad was in a cove next to that in Trap Cove, so it was just always a part of our family history. And as a high school student, I worked in a crab plant as a snow crab butcher, and it was just something that was always omnipresent, I guess. And when I was finishing high school, Frederick mentioned the moratorium. It was quite a dire time because there wasn't a lot of hope or optimism around this province of where you would get work. And I know for myself personally, I found that really depressing and wasn't really sure what the future would bring. So I guess fast forward a bit today, I find that's a part of what motivates me to be involved in this work, is that not only the community where I'm from, but all of the communities along the Labrador coast are pretty well dependent upon small scale fisheries, either directly or indirectly. And they depend on that for survival. So it is motivating. And when you mention that small scale fisheries are not a part of or a priority, I should say, for the blue economy strategy, that was very troubling to hear, because without access, some of these communities are just simply not going to be sustainable, frankly. So currently, I'm the executive director for the Torngat Wildlife Plants and Fisheries Secretariat. This is a co-management organization set up by the Labrador Inuit Land Claim Agreement. And we make recommendations to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans about species such as snow crab, Arctic char, northern shrimp, turbot, and so on. And one of the things that struck me, I guess, in fish management is that it was very biologically focused, and DFO in particular had a lot of emphasis on the natural sciences. And I'm more of a social scientist and feel that the human dimensions of fisheries are equally as important. And I'm cluing up now a PhD in public health at the University of Guelph, where I also had an interest, like Maria, in population medicine and what connection fisheries have to Inuit well-being along the Labrador coast. So I feel bringing in some combination of life history and work experience and different types of degrees have led me to some sort of transdisciplinary space. And that's the best way I can explain it. Hopefully what comes out in my research in the years ahead fit that definition. And I think they will. So it's been nice to meet all of you and see this network come together. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. That was really interesting to listen to everybody talk little snippets of what's super interesting and fascinating about their work. So the next question, I'm going to direct it to Sarah and Emily. And for your case, can you tell us what opportunities and challenges exist for the lives and livelihoods in small-scale fisheries in Canada regarding the blue economy strategy?
I can go first, I guess, if that's okay, Emily.
Yep.
Yeah, so my case study is Fogo Island, which is off the north coast of Newfoundland. And yeah, they had a lot of challenges and opportunities, but I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned because they've really gone through an entire transformation in the past 50 years. So we had the inshore fishing economy that was there since the 18th century, but it was when these large industrial ships that started to creep into the waters, there was overfishing, and it really squeezed them out of the market. So what's really unique about Fogo Island is that in '67, they established a cooperative for their fish, which is now called the Fogo Island Cooperative Society. It's community owned. The fishers all consolidate their fish catches, and instead of being just a single lone fisher selling in the market, they're now a united front, which is so, again, unique. And so this has been around for 50 years. And what they have done is they've invested their profits, their surpluses into communities, creating more jobs, fish processing plants. And their network has expanded as well into working with Shorefast Foundation, which is a charity, as well as Fogo Island Fish, which is their social enterprise business. So we have this interplay between all three of these, and it was through this connection of wanting to stay home in Fogo Island and not resettle because of, the loss of the fishing industry. So the interplay over the past 50 years, especially in the past, I'd say 20, they've really focused on sustainable fishing equipment, such as cod potting, hand line fishing, which basically nothing, it doesn't create any bycatch. So it's really sustainable, and Fogo Island fish will buy these fish, and it's they market it on it being sustainable, ethically sourced. It's become a niche market in these high scale restaurants. So in terms of lessons, I think that there's just so much to learn about the motivation that people have to actually sustain their homes, and the challenges that they can overcome together.
Great, thanks, Emily.
All right. I guess thinking more, I'm going to try to talk more to the blue economy strategy and the things that I've been thinking about in relationship to my own work. And as Zaman was saying earlier, fisheries continues to be the most dangerous industry to work in Canada and around globally, I would say. And there's been a lot of leadership, obviously, in Newfoundland with on fishing safeties with the Newfoundland Fisheries Safety Association, and then as well as where I'm based in Nova Scotia and elsewhere in the Maritimes. But it continues to be very dangerous. And so when I look at the blue economy strategy and I'm thinking about sort of a growth-oriented strategy that also doesn't mention small-scale fisheries and the risks that those small-scale fishers take, it's very concerning, very, very concerning. So this year in Nova Scotia alone, in Cape Breton and in the Bay of Fundy, there were 8 fatalities. And that rate is fairly normal. So it's been sort of disturbing to me how normalized that is, I guess. And so a strategy that doesn't acknowledge that and sort of doesn't provide any mention of mechanisms or mitigating programs that are going to address that is a problem. I would also say in my work, like a lot of what I have learned about is inequality within small scale fisheries, and how smaller scale operators who, let's say, can't scale up and buy a larger boat are forced to compete in the same fisheries under the same conditions as a 60-foot, a 50-foot or a 60-foot boat. And that is, when you talk to people about safety and weather hazards, let's say, they're forced to go out in conditions that boats that can tolerate that weather are going out in. So I think, when you think about, I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks so much. So now we're going to shift a little bit to governance. And I want to ask this to a few of you. Why is getting governance right for small scale fisheries in Atlantic Canada so important? Sandra.
Thanks, Evan. I'll have a little preface by completing my introduction on my research because I was too excited to talk about communities and sharks. So I work with small scale fisheries within the context of integrated management, which I consider to be a broad governance strategy that is currently being used to move towards sustainable development, or now in Canada and abroad, the blue economy strategy more generally. And I focus specifically on marine spatial planning from a process perspective and an equity perspective, rather than drawing lines on a map. So what does integrated management mean as governance? So it really focuses on how to move beyond the current siloed based management paradigm that many nations, including Canada, are working within. And so as we move towards integrating different sectors to lead to more environmentally and socially desirable outcomes, especially when it comes to coastal and marine systems and resources, we really need to focus in at the community level and include the small scale fisheries in not just to consult, but to meaningfully involve them. So that's where the governance piece that I work at is trying to, learn from local contexts, what's working and what's not working, with small scale fisheries and local actor groups being involved in these types of integrated processes. As well as to equip communities with the knowledge and resources to build their capacities to be able to participate in some of these processes. And I'll just quickly say this is really the nexus that I work at right now, specifically from the learning and sharing perspective. So I'm very fortunate to amidst the sometimes overwhelming coverage of, current challenges facing coastal communities and small scale fisheries, there are many innovative solutions emerging at the local scale. So my work these days is to develop a coloring book and to lead a podcast and encourage researchers to share their stories and research in a little bit of a new and novel way that goes beyond academia, goes beyond the traditional, readership of journal articles. And as a researcher myself and practitioners, we often get impatient to share our findings and the stories that we're learning from communities in a timely fashion, because we have to go and scrub the data and organize it and analyze it. So podcasts and Pubcast, which I'll share a link in the chat so you can learn a little bit more about, are a way to really break down these barriers and communicate research in an accessible way that is digestible to our parents and our brothers and the community. So I'm really excited to really focus on that intersection of integrated management and knowledge sharing and storytelling from a little bit of a transdisciplinary perspective that moves beyond academia. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sandra. Maria, do you have something to add here?
Yes, so I do believe governance is very important. All policies have intended and unintended consequences. So there was mention of the moratorium, but there were different moratoria actually, and there were many efforts to downsize the fishery to just decrease the number of people who fish in the North Atlantic Canada Ocean. So these were successful. These policies were successful. There was also a professionalization change, how people become fish harvesters. So there's less people fishing today in small scale fisheries. Actually, in the last 20 years, half of the workforce is gone. And the workforce that remains today is about 10,000 registered fish harvesters, which 40% of them are over the age of 54. Which means that the renewal of this workforce might be a challenge in future years, because there were a lot of people who were sort of pushed out from the fishery, but not many people were pulling in, and not many youth. So it's making it very difficult. There's two types of fish harvesters, the way I see it. There's the owners of vessels and licenses, and there's the crew members. So if you want to have non-precarious employment in the fisheries, in small scale fisheries, you have to have an owner job. And it's very difficult to get from crew to owner. And this is why we see so many, why the workforce is aging. So we have to think about policies in the future of how we can involve or make it easier for youth to come and work in the small scale fisheries, because it's not only a recruitment problem for the fisheries, but it's also a recruitment problem for rural coastal communities, because Newfoundland and Labrador has a very high unemployment rate and a very high out-migration rate. So I think that's why we have to think about how policies today can affect the future, and not only for us, but also for future generations, for the youth.
Thank you. Tying into the theme we'll head to shortly before we close. Jamie, I wonder if there's a perspective on governance here from the Torngat.
Yeah, when we started this project with the Ocean Frontier Institute, and we did the taking stock part of that, it was really interesting to learn from the Natsivut fisheries that Inuit in the region weren't the primary beneficiaries over the years. And often I can use an example of the cod fishery that was overexploited in the region and disappeared long before the cod moratorium in 1992. And when you talk to fishers in this region today, they refer to the moratorium in a negative way, obviously, because they were left out of any government assistance and retraining and so on that others in the province got to benefit from. So they saw that as a huge inequity and different treatment of different people and different fisheries. So fast forward to today, in 2005, there was the Labrador Inuit Land Claim Agreement signed. So there's a modern day treaty in place, and all of our work now revolves around fisheries governance in this region, and it gives Inuit a process and a way to make sure their voices are heard at the federal minister level. And I'll give a quick shout out to Rachel Cadman, who's one of our attendees there, I just noticed, and we're collaborating with her to in her PhD to do a visioning project now, where we can have a collective Inuit vision, hopefully at the end of this, where we can come forward and start articulating what we want to see the fishery evolve like in the future and have more self-determination. So that's where our project is headed, and we're really excited about where that's going to lead.
Great, thanks, Jamie. That's actually a perfect lead into this next question as we're wrapping up, which is how we can learn from changing small-scale fisheries lives and livelihoods for the future. So, Zemin, I'm wondering if you wanted to talk about
yes,
this aspect in terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Christine. So I just want to share some facts and figure with the panelists and our audience here. This data I adopted from the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. Back in 2017, there were 13,300 fishing vessels in the Canadian oceans, and this number increased to 14,100 in next year in 2018, which is an increase of 800 vessels, which is very good for the business, of course. But if you look at the number of fatalities, back in 2017, there were 3 people died in the small scale fisheries. And this number of 3 increased to 17 in the next year in 2018, which is an increase of 14 people death. And if you look at the data from 2011 to 2019, on average, there were 10 fatalities per year. So there is something which we are lacking in terms of the legislations for the occupational health and safety of the people associated with the small scale fisheries. If there are legislation in some areas, there is a lack in the enforcement of these legislations. There is a lack in the trainings of the fishermen. They need some technical support and prevention and the warning systems which can help them to perform their business in a safe environment. So we need to focus on 2 actions. In particularly, the first is that we can prevent the accident. And the second is not only minimize, but we should eliminate the human casualties in the small scale fisheries so that we can encourage other people to join this business. We definitely want them to have the business, but it should not be at the stake of the lives of the people who are associated with these small scale fisheries. Thank you.
Yeah, important. Thanks. Frederick, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I can add something, which for now I'll remove my DFO hat and I will put my townie and foodie hat. So as I said, I am from a small island in the middle of the Gulf, and lobster fishery on the Magdalen Islands is really the first economy, especially since the moratorium. So, but historically, most of the fisheries was always for export. And, I've heard stories of my parents when they, as children, their mother would send them biking to the factory and they would collect in plastic bags the byproducts of the processing plant. Basically, the claws and the tail of the lobster was sent for export, and the body was just thrown for fertilizer in the garden. So they would pick it up and as in the family process it. And well, as the market is getting globalized, there's more and more export. There used to be co-ops. All the processing plants were co-ops, and now it's more like private investors. So there's more and more lobster going everywhere in the world. But last year, and this is the anecdote, because of COVID, temporary worker couldn't come to Les Îles La Madeleine to process. So basically, the high quality lobster live was sent away, but all the lobster with a little defect, missing a claw or something, couldn't be cracked locally because there was no workers. So the market was flooded with fresh locally caught lobsters. So every weekend I was speaking to my family, they were having kitchen party, cooking lobster and packaging them to freeze them for the winter. So yeah, it's more. I thought it was an interesting story, and this is what would like to contribute to this ebook we're doing now. So yeah, just an anecdote how you can, I like to cook. I like fish, and this kind of access to locally caught product is very, very interesting to me. And I thought it was a good natural experiment, the COVID.
Thank you so much. So we have a few minutes left. I wonder if there's any questions on Zoom or YouTube here that we can open things up to. So while maybe this a question populates here, I'm going to ask, what makes you hopeful about SSF CAN, this new research network embarking on this TD journey beginning in IAFA, which is a mouthful? Anybody have any particular thoughts?
I had just a quick thought that I'm hopeful for, I guess, is that when we are involved in trying to advocate for Indigenous fisheries from the perspective that I'm coming from, it's been really difficult to have any reliable data and to be able to share with people how significant these fisheries are. So I'm hoping this network will be able to give us a broader sense and something that's quantifiable. So when we do talk to ministers and policymakers, they can sort of get the magnitude of how important it is. And without that data, it's been challenging to get across. And I think larger scale fisheries and industry do a much better job at that. And they had the resources to do it, I know, but I'm hoping this network can help us level the playing field a bit.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll turn to maybe one more person. Anybody who's hopeful?
Yeah, I'd just like to build off of what Jamie said, is like building on these connections is where the transdisciplinary comes in. And it feels like that sustainable small scale fisheries need more participation from just more than the community members. And I feel I'm really hopeful that this transdisciplinary network will expand the local to the global, while also having these interconnections and everything to really support the small scale fisheries and other small scale fisheries. So it's very exciting.
Thank you so much. So there's a great question by Lillian here, also an SSF CAN member and member of Ocean Frontier Institute Module I. What are the tensions between innovation and more traditional artisanal fishing in respect to fisheries, small scale fisheries in Canada and the blue economy? Are there any? Are there tensions?
I can speak broadly if no one's going to jump out at the blue economy. So this is very much a governing, issue in my mind. The authorities who have been tasked to manage and govern these ecosystems, I think they are, there is a form of tension on being pragmatic versus being innovative and trying to, transition and transform to a different way of researching, communicating, managing. And going back to the hopeful question, that's exactly why I'm hopeful. There are these points of tension, but they're currently being acknowledged across actor groups, and discussions are happening, in DFO, in communities, on how to maybe resolve some conflicts, some historical conflicts that have brought towards this tension, and to bring social science alongside natural science, bring communities alongside the traditional governing authorities. So I'm very hopeful, but because these tensions exist. I can't give a specific example for the blue economy, but they definitely exist. But I think we really just need to focus on having deliberative spaces to really unpack these.
Thanks. So we have a question that you need to answer, Sarah, in 1 minute, if you can, if it's possible. It might be summer. This is from Yinji Lee on YouTube. Nice story about Fogo Island Cooperative. What would be the main reasons for their success?
Main reasons for their success is the cooperative is only as good as its members. So it is about, the cooperative is governed by the people. It's an elected board. So it didn't work except for the people that really wanted to stay and really wanted to keep their fishing culture. I hope that answers your question.
That was under 1 minute, which is really fantastic. So maybe you two, Yinji and Sarah, should talk a little bit more. We are nearing the end of our session here. We're at the end. I did want to acknowledge some comments that emerged across platforms. Barry Darby made the comment that small-scale fisheries are the most economic way to harvest our oceans. There was also a question from Sheila, which we don't have an answer for right now, because we're at this initial phase of thinking through what are small-scale fisheries in Canada. Sheila asked, how do you define them in the Canadian context? Is it all inshore fisheries or some other smaller group? So this is the kind of question that we're going to be embarking on as we look forward to SSF CAN and its ebook and its actions into the future. So thank you so much to our panelists, to my fellow moderator, Christine Knott, and also to the wonderful attendees and your questions and comments in both Zoom and YouTube. So thanks again for coming to our session, exploring SSF in Canada and a transdisciplinary future. Have a wonderful rest of your World Oceans Day.
Thanks so much, everybody. And thanks, Evan.